Welcome to Emotion Well, EFR's podcast about all things related to emotional well-being. I'm Johanna Dunleavy, the EAP Operations Director for Employee and Family Resources, also known as EFR, and I'm the host of our podcast. As an FYI, EFR is located in Des Moines, Iowa, and we are Iowa's first employee assistance program and provide a variety of services you can learn more about at www.efr.org. Welcome, Nick Krehbiel, to the Emotion Well podcast. Nick and I have recently met in the office here at EFR, where he came and facilitated a really fun and fascinating workshop between me and several of my colleagues. And so I thought he'd be a great guest to have on Emotion Well. So, Nick, welcome.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate the kind words about my session that we did here about a week ago. So that's great. Thanks.
Well, tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and how you came into the world of, workplace consulting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've done a lot of different things over the years. I when I graduated from high school, I knew I wanted to do something with history. So I majored in history. I was going to be a history teacher. And then I decided I wanted to be a history professor. And so in that time, however, during those years, both my father and my grandfather were farmer co-op managers.
Okay.
So I grew up, I always tell people I grew up around agriculture as closely as you can without actually growing up on the farm.
Okay.
But, when I was 18 or 19, I decided, I needed to get as far away from it as I could, like a lot of 18-year-olds do. And went off school, ended up getting my PhD, but I still came back in the summers and would work at some of the locations, worked as a location manager for a couple of years as a summer job. Always fell in love with wheat harvest. It was something I enjoyed very much in southern Kansas. I grew up in a town called Pratt, which is about 70 miles west of Wichita. And then when I graduated, got married, started a family, was in the middle of the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. And so I went back into the ag cooperative world and worked as a safety director for a cooperatively owned insurance firm, and then went back to my hometown co-op and worked there as head of compliance, dealing with safety, HR, IT, number of different things, wore a lot of hats there. But that was where I really started to kind of develop the personnel development and work in corporate personnel operations. And then after a while, here a couple of years ago, I just came to a realization that it was time to start my own business. I really had a passion for agriculture and the people involved. And it was just kind of one of those things that the time was right. I was working in a job that wasn't working out at the time, and so we went our separate ways. And I started Agri-Prime Consulting as a result, and I focused on the things that I valued the most, where I saw a need in the space, and that would be in such things as strategic planning, business development, kind of looking at the financial and revenue side of things, some strategic operational discussions there. Personnel, leadership, and management development. That was something that I really, really pushed for in all of the roles that I had been in previously, to various levels of success, and saw a need there throughout the industry. And then also meeting facilitation. So it kind of all ties my backgrounds together. Being in a classroom and working in corporate operations, working in personnel development, those types of things. And so now that's what I'm doing in a consulting role. And my focus and my background was a mixture of higher ed and agriculture. And my niche within this company and kind of how I present it is agriculture, but that's not who I work with solely.
Yeah. So you grew up in Kansas. Were you K-State or KU? Or neither?
Okay. I'm one of those guys that's a little bit of both, because when I was a little kid, we lived in Lawrence. So I grew up as a KU fan. the company Dad was working for at the time had season tickets to KU basketball games, and we lived there actually when Danny Manning was the in high school at Lawrence High, and then
Wow.
went on, and then of course we moved a couple of years right before they won the national title in '88.
Uh,
But I grew up a KU fan, and then when I went to go work on my PhD, um, my focus is within my field of American history. K-State had a really good program, and so I went to
okay.
K-State. And so I'm a K-State grad and a K-State fan, but I secretly root for the Jayhawks so long as they're not
Yeah.
playing
So there are
K-State.
people in Iowa that are like that too. Maybe they went to Iowa State, but they're Hawkeyes in their hearts, right? So, well,
Yep.
very cool. And then you ended up in Iowa. I'm just curious how people end up
Hmm.
in Iowa. You're in the Des Moines metro area. Did you come
Yes, I
here
am.
with family or for a job?
It was both, actually. Came here for a job, and it turned out that we were able to relocate to an area where we had a lot of family closely centered or close
Yeah.
by. We have an aunt that lives in Norwalk and another that lives in Ames.
Well, very cool. I want to talk to you about that workshop that I attended, but before we get to
Yeah.
that, I want to ask you just a little bit about the agriculture industry because that is, like you said, you don't work exclusively or consult and train
Mhm.
exclusively within that industry, but that is really where your roots are, and that's
Yes.
where you feel the most comfortable and probably have had more experience. So, what are some of the things that you've seen as maybe emerging trends or patterns within that space as it relates to team members and their maybe well being, their communication styles, their ability to thrive in the workplace?
Well, agriculture is an incredibly dynamic space, and it's definitely has its cycles that you see over time. But at the same time, like many other industries, there's some truisms depending on where you're at that are always the same. In using an example of wheat harvest in Kansas, because of the size of the equipment and the speed in which you can get the crop out of the field, harvest doesn't last as long as it used to.
Okay.
You can be done in a certain region in 10 or 15 days, whereas before it was a solid 3 weeks
Okay.
at least that you'd be working. You put a little rain in there too, then you're going to be going out a lot longer. Um, and you're seeing that trend across a lot of different things. Ag is getting bigger. Ag is getting faster. Ag is becoming very technologically advanced. The things that have stayed the same, like using that wheat harvest as an example, there's still that understanding that when it's time to bring the crop in, it's you drop everything and it's all hands on deck.
Hmm.
It's the joke we used to use around home was the best looking field of wheat is stubble because you got to get it out. It's never as
Yeah.
good as it was the day before once it gets
Yeah.
ripe. The other crops are a little bit different, but wheat was unique in that way. Um, but what I'm seeing with the personnel is there's still that dedication that you have to the odd hours. Um, that within some industries you're still punching a clock, but it could be at 4, 5, 6 in the morning, or you could be starting at 1, 2, or 3 in the afternoon, just depending on the
Right.
weather, or depending on the shift, or depending on whatever different type of job you're doing. That's always kind of been there. But the skill sets that I see, and this has definitely been a trend over the last 15 to 25 years, is the increasing digital and technical knowledge that is needed. It has become a much more um, high level technical and modern technology skill set that's needed. When somebody says you think of the farmer, you're thinking of that Iowa painting by Grant Wood with the American Gothic, with the
Yep.
man and his wife with the pitchfork, and you're out,
Fun fact, in
one
front
with
of
the
a house
ground.
in Iowa. Yep.
Yep, it
Eldon,
is. Yeah,
Iowa. I've been there.
he was over there from near Anamosa,
Yeah.
actually, in the Cedar Rapids area. But yeah, at any rate, we kind of have that idyllic romantic image of the farmer, whereas the modern farmer today, and his hired help need to be incredibly technologically literate. In fact, it's to the point now, well, one of the major issues that I find fascinating is the shift that what John Deere has, to where there are legal questions still out there unresolved as to who actually owns the machinery and the right to work on it. Because you're not talking about turning a wrench and just changing the oil. You're talking about a computer system
Mm-hmm.
that is linked, and now it's becoming much more about the data. And so that's a whole different skill set. And frankly, it's a whole different um, mindset that you see. And you have a number of people that it's interesting to see that how different generations are kind of engaging with that. And frankly, I mean, that's what ag is now. It's still that core of, the love of the land and the production of the ground and the love of the farm. Because, you know, if you want to make a 5 or 6% margin and work all day to do it, farming is for you. And that hasn't really changed, especially when prices are low. You're real happy right now when you're a cattle farmer because prices are through the roof. My brother has a cattle herd back home in Kansas, and he's loving it. But up until this year, it wasn't much fun for him. The first 2 years, they were trying to get it going. And so, what I see in the ag space is that, to get back to the crux of your question, is it's much more advanced and it's much more dynamic and it's much more complicated than people really give it credit for, because that's a big umbrella that you're talking about when you talk about ag.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it can be something, like I know co-ops pretty well. I know there's a large co-op out in the Pacific Northwest that they do a number of different things, but their core is hazelnut production.
Okay.
And that could not be more different from somebody who owns a cooperative feed mill out here producing feed for hogs and chickens and cattle, but they're both still agriculture.
Yeah.
And so there is a huge breadth under that umbrella that is becoming, in every facet, more and more technologically advanced as each year goes by.
Sure. And for our listeners, can you define what a cooperative is? Whether it's
Sure.
a grain cooperative or a hazelnut cooperative?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the co-op foundation, a quick one sentence description of it is it's a way of organizing a business that the profits all go back to the membership.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the one sentence business answer, but really what they do is that it's a way for the farmer to do collectively what they cannot do for themselves.
Okay.
Okay, so Farmer Joe out here has, a couple of wheat fields, and I'm grossly oversimplifying this, by the way, but he's got, a couple of wheat fields, and he wants to sell this to the mill, and he's not really getting a good price that they want. Or, as an even better example, why they were first formed in the first place, when we were talking about the grain co-ops, um, in the early 19th century, it was shipping rates on the railroads. And an individual farmer that's only got, a couple of fields worth of wheat in the bags at home or in the silo, however he's keeping it, he wasn't able to get the shipping rates that he needed to get because he just didn't have the bargaining power with
Gotcha.
railroad. But you pool together 30 farmers in an area and they're pooling together what they have, then they can negotiate as a group with the railroad. And the way that works in a cooperative is, they're selling their grain to the co-op, and they're using their equity and the money the co-op makes to build these big elevators or build these dry fertilizer sheds that the farmer can't build that huge big facility. And the
Right.
farmer's not holding, 15 million bushels of grain. But the co-op that he's a member of is, and they're negotiating they're buying his grain and then selling it so they can take a little bit of a profit. And so it's a place for them to take their outputs, whether that's hazelnuts or wheat or cranberries, oranges, almonds. Sunkist is a cooperative. Ocean
Okay.
Spray is a growers cooperative. So it just depends on what the individual product is that is organized as a co-op, and there's tons of different kinds. And so that's a place for them to take their outputs. But then, there's also fertilizer, chemical, seed, fuel, all sorts of different things. Whatever the farmer needs or whatever the producer needs to be able to operate their small little operation, the co-op can provide that. And then what ends up happening is, okay, so let's say the farmer buys when you talk about a grain co-op, like in Kansas or in Iowa or in Nebraska, the farmer buys their seed, buys their fertilizer, buys their crop protection products, buys their fuel, all of that, and they get a pretty good price for that, because the larger the co-op is, the more buying power they have in the wholesale marketplace.
Right.
Can get a better price and pass that better price on to the producer. And then they grow their corn or grow their wheat or grow their sorghum or their soybeans, and then they can sell that wherever they want, including the co-op. And the co-op can, have that position, and then they can market it collectively to earn their profit. And then all the profits that they're taking, whether it's on the sale of grain or selling to the farmer with the, chemicals and fertilizer and all of that, then they pay that back to the farmer in patronage.
Okay.
Usually they get, a certain percentage between 15 and 20, 25% in cash at the end of the year, where they've done their yearly audit and say, we made this much money, so this is how much we're going to get back to the membership. And then the rest of that then goes into the equity pool that the co-op then uses to build new facilities, to just have a stronger balance sheet. If you're profitable over a number of years, then you've got a lot of equity on your balance sheet that you can use to borrow money from CoBank, and you can use to build faster elevators, build larger dry fertilizer sheds, all the different things to aid the farmer. And that changes over time too, because, for example, one of the co-ops that I was at was founded in 1915. And, its charter's still in place. It has merged in a number of other entities, but it still survives. And it was farmed as a coal co-op. Farmers wanted to pool their buying power to get a better deal on buying coal. Well, nobody burns coal in their houses anymore, at least not in that
Right.
part of the country. And so it's not necessary. And there's things that different co-ops do. I've seen some that are implement dealers as well. The most unique one that I saw was one in Oklahoma that the local funeral home would have closed, and the farmers in that area felt that they were underserved in the funeral home business, and so they wanted to make sure that there was one that was there. And so the
Yeah.
local co-op has grain, fertilizer, fuel, and whatever services you need for your funeral home expenses.
Wow. That is unique. I didn't think you were going there with that example. I'm like, wow, funeral. I like how you mentioned Sunkist and Ocean Spray, because when I
Mhm.
think of cooperatives, I'm thinking, I know of several that are in the state of Iowa, and they're usually like grain cooperatives, and they're in rural Iowa, and they're small scale, right? But those farmers are stronger together. But then when you mentioned Ocean
Absolutely.
Spray, I think about those commercials I've seen of the cranberry bogs, in Wisconsin. And so, like, someone in Wisconsin who might have a cranberry bog, they might be part of that Ocean Spray cooperative that's like sending their cranberries into Ocean Spray. Am I inferring that correctly?
Yeah. Yeah, you are.
Okay.
Um, some of the others that would influence you directly. Have you ever bought Land O'Lakes butter or cream?
I certainly have. They're out of Minnesota, I believe.
They are. They're one of the largest co-ops in the United States.
Okay.
because it's not just their butter and cream and milk products. It was started initially as, a dairy cooperative, just, like any other small dairy cooperative, and it
Yeah.
grew and grew and grew. But over the years, over the last number of years, they have acquired a number of different businesses, including they're a very large crop protection product, agronomy product distributor, and they have a very large fertilizer distribution network as well.
Okay.
And so when you see a commercial for Land O'Lakes, it's about butter and cream because you're not
Yeah.
going to sell fertilizer to the local farmer
Right.
by advertising during the local evening news. But the other really, really large one that a lot of people don't realize is connected unless you're in the co-op world is that if you stop at a Cinex gas station,
Okay.
um, that is a cooperatively owned venture that comes out of CHS. And that is another massive cooperative that is also headquartered in the Minneapolis area. And that
Interesting.
that came about from Central Harvest States and Cinex merger a number of years back, and now it's a quote full service co-op that does everything that the farmer needs, but they have a massive fuel distribution network that co-ops utilize, and they
Okay.
operate as a co-op too, as does Land O'Lakes, because we were members of both in the co-ops that I was in, and so we would buy through them because they could
Hmm.
collectively get a better price to wholesalely distribute to us. And then as a result, we could get a better price. And the larger we were, that helped us out too, and so on and so forth. And then depending on how they performed, and then we would get patronage based on how much business it did.
Interesting. Well, we're going to transition to talking about the disc. And I think what's cool about that is that you might, be partnering with a cooperative and do some, consulting
Mm-hmm.
with them. But you can also go into a small nonprofit organization such as Employee and Family Resources and meet with one of their teams, as you did last week with us, and facilitate a similar or same workshop. And so I want to hear a little bit about your experience or what sparked your interest in becoming is it called DISC certified,
Yeah.
or a
And I'm an
certification,
authorized partner.
an authorized partner. So how did you get introduced to DISC, and from there what motivated you to take that next step to become an authorized partner?
Um, well, I had seen and knew about DISC from some other workplace workshops that I'd done over the years. It wasn't until we made the move up here to Iowa that I was with a company that they had DISC as a very specific part of their employee development,
Okay.
and they had a consultant that facilitated that for them, because that's the way Wiley works. Actually, is they sell to training and development partners and companies. So if you want to use DISC by Wiley, you have to go through people like me in order to bring that into the place.
Maybe we should back up because I know what DISC is since I just did the workshop, but
Yeah,
someone
yeah.
listening might be like, what the heck are you talking about? So what is DISC
It's
essentially?
at its core, it's personality profile,
Okay.
and um, there are four main styles within it, and the reason it's called DISC is because the four styles are D, I, S, and C, and that's kind of the direct style, or the let's see, you've got the I style, which they're more engaging.
Okay.
You have the S style, which is kind of the steadiness and wanting to just kind of go through and make sure that there's the harmony and getting things done.
That's me, everyone. That's what I typed as.
Steady Eddie.
That's right.
Uh, and then the C is the more considered to be the more conscientious, or focusing on accuracy and making sure you want to get it right. Um, but no one is just that one thing. Okay,
Right.
they're a blend of everything. It just kind of, in your case, when we looked at your profile, you're very strongly into that particular sector, but there's other elements that you definitely see within your personality.
Sure.
And it's based off of an assessment that is sent to you. And so you answer a number of questions. And it depends on kind of what we're focusing on because I offer a number of different things. The base level of DISC is just here's your style and here's how you work with other styles and here's the way you kind of tend to work and think about things. But then we also did the workplace element. Here's what it's like for you to work with this particular style.
Yeah.
Here's what your coworkers are, and here's how you can best engage with some of your coworkers. There's also a emotional intelligence package. There's a productive conflict package. There's a sales package, and there's a management package. All sorts of different ways to utilize DISC in all of the elements for our interpersonal relationships in the workplace.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I've done the Enneagram and I've done Myers-Briggs, so different typing assessments. I've been at EFR for over 10 years now, so I've done both of those here in the past, and I was even years ago, I did one where I was a certain kind of bird. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It feels like it's
That
maybe
one I
the
have
most
not. No.
feels like it's the most generic of all the typing assessments, and maybe doesn't exist any longer. There's the colors one, so I think they're all very interesting.
Yes.
And what I found, fascinating was like in this room there were about 10 of us there. We did have a lot of I's on the team. We had a couple C's, and then I was the kind of lonely only or only lonely S. But during this workshop that you facilitated, I felt like we learned so much about each other. Even though I've been working with some of these people for a long time, some things started to click. Like, some people really need a lot of information before taking that first step. And some people need no information before taking that first step. Some people have, a harder time maybe being more direct or delegating or telling people what their next steps are, and other people can do that really well. And so what I got from it was, knowing that I'm an S, and that one of my coworkers is a C, and another one or several of them are I's, and one of them is a D. Like, how can I work more productively with these people? Versus, because I think sometimes with typing assessments, people get stuck in this mentality of like, well, that's just how I am. I'm an Enneagram 4, which is my number, or I'm an S, or I'm an INFJ, if you're Myers-Briggs. And it's like, well, okay, that's great, but like, that's not really who you are,
Exactly.
So, don't put yourself in that box. So I'm curious from your perspective as an authorized provider for the Wiley version of the DISC, because it sounds like there's different versions you could maybe do, but you're Wiley specific certified or partnered. How do you get that message across in workshops where it's like, this isn't just about like, this is who you are and how you are, and there's really no changing that, but like, because you know this about yourself, what can you do with that information?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with your last phrase there is you're learning about yourself, but what is it you're going to do with that information? Okay. You don't, the purpose of a DISC facilitation and learning that about yourself is not to be able to say, well, I'm a D style, so I'm just going to say what's on my mind and get to the point, and everything else in my way be darned. I'm just going to bulldoze right through it. That's not what this is about. The other thing is, what I said before holds true in that, yes, you may be strongly inclined toward the D style or the S style or whatever style it may be, but that doesn't mean that's quote unquote who you are.
Right.
That's where you tend to go to when dealing with things, when just working, just getting through the day, whatever it may be. And so it's important to be flexible and understand that about yourself, but then also understand that about other people.
Yeah.
Before I went through DISC training and then learned even more in depth from facilitating and providing this to clients, I used to. It's really easy to draw certain stereotypes about certain styles of people that then
Hmm.
you realize by digging a little bit deeper, it's not. One of the things I'll hear sometimes is a person who is a high intense D style, boy, they're just a jerk. You're just dealing with such a jerk of a person. And no, that's not the case. Now, a person may, they may be a jerk and be a D style, but I've met folks that are the C style, the I style, and the S style that are different.
Jerks fall anywhere in the spectrum, right? Like they could
They're
be in your, yeah.
everywhere, right? Yeah, just as are good, solid, decent people,
Yes,
and
yes.
yeah, I mean, it takes all kinds to make up a world, and it's the same way within who tends to populate in the disc styles. But sometimes you'll hear, well, you just need to get to know that person, which is true. But with disc, you're finding out, with a D style, they're directed to the point. They're not a person that really wants to sit and chit chat. They're not going to want to analyze a problem by looking at all the different areas that we can look at. They want to get directly to the point, get results, and go on to the next thing,
Yeah.
right? And the I style, if you're looking at and for me personally, I'm kind of the IS style. I'm a strong mix of the IS, but I have some elements because of being results driven of the D style. And so I want to look at a lot of different things. I want to bring all sorts of different people in. I want to check with them, and I want to have fun while we're doing it. I want to be energetic. I want to get the team motivated to do things. And that's always kind of been my style, was in managing people, was it was about the team, right? And kind of be the coach and the cheerleader or the ringleader, whatever it is, set the direction, and then you guys go do your great things because you're all good people, and let's go do this. And I realized after going through this disc that I can't do that all the time, every time with every
Right.
person, because you have to adapt your styles to kind of meet people halfway. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you just roll over and be somebody that you're not.
Right.
It's a self awareness, and that's why it works so well with emotional intelligence. You know yourself, and you learn to know the others around you very, very well.
Yeah. I think sometimes as well, like when you said self-awareness, I think that is such an important component of well-being. And so as someone who's worked in worksite well-being for
Hmm.
my entire career, I've been out of college over 20 years now. And I think about no matter what you're coaching someone on, whatever goals they have, self awareness is so important. And so, if you're thinking about in a workplace setting and effective communication or collaborative teamwork or just efficiencies and
Hmm.
how to get people to work at whatever they feel is their best. A lot of that starts with self-awareness on the individual's behalf, right? Like, I work better in this environment and I work better when I set this boundary. And so I think I love that. That is one thing I like about the typing assessments and with the disc specifically is like
Hmm.
it raised self-awareness about myself first and foremost. And then it gives me information. It gives me intel on my coworkers, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I know that, one of my coworkers is going to need information, tidied up a little bit more before it's presented.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas someone else is good with an off the cuff comment at the water cooler about an update on a project. Someone else might need that in an email so that they can really read it and let it soak in. And so that's what I liked about it. It was like my own self awareness, but that insight into my team members as well. I have a random question, and in my brain, I'm visualizing the disc pie chart. And so
Hmm.
at the top are D and I, and then the lower right quadrant is the S, and lower left quadrant is a C. You said you're an IS. Is that a pretty common combination? Like, would IS be a more common combination than, like, I can't imagine S and D are ever really like competing for the same person. Like, can you
Yeah.
cross like diagonally, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, can you be a D with a little S wing or vice versa?
You can. And
Okay.
that's where the quadrants. The quadrants are what they are, right?
Okay.
But when you see your shading in a particular area, or where the dot is located on the actual map, um, that essentially is telling you how strong you are in an
Gotcha.
area.
Okay.
Now, you're not going to see a type that is labeled as a DC, no, excuse me, DS or an IC, because they are on opposite
That's
sides.
what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Like those two wouldn't be like you wouldn't be sharing those like I'm a DS. You'd
yeah,
be maybe an IS or a DC could be a possibility.
yes, absolutely. But what would happen then is, like I said, I'm very strongly an IS. Like, I'm very close to that line,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm just to the north and considered an I. So I'm an
Yeah.
IS rather than an SI. And it's
Yeah.
kind of splitting hairs, but that's what it is on the map. But then I have elements, especially with the whole being results oriented, of that D. So I'm not
Okay.
considered an ISD style. I'm considered the IS style with some proclivities
Yeah.
toward the D style.
Right. And any one person could relate to or have characteristics of any of the styles. It's just that you
Absolutely.
will
Yep.
have you'll fall into a primary category and maybe you'll have a secondary like what you have.
Hmm.
Um, the thing that I find interesting is, when I've taken assessments like this over the years, I mean, I tend to type the same. And, like if I were to take the
Oh,
disc,
yeah.
if I had taken the disc 5 years ago or in 5 years, I feel pretty confident I would probably still be an S. Um, And when you compare it to some other typing assessments, just some of the characteristics of where I've fallen, like on an Enneagram 4 or with a Myers Briggs INFJ, it's like I'm not surprised that that's what I was with DISC. So I think that's fascinating too. If you've taken other typing assessments, I think this is a good one. It's easy to take. It was an online, pretty short survey or kind of assessment. And so that'd be my next question is if an organization wanted you to come in and facilitate a workshop like this, I know
Yes.
we'll be offering that on behalf of Employee and Family Resources. So we're partnering with Nick and adding this course to our training catalog. But if you don't have EFR as employee assistance benefit, or if you want to connect with Nick directly, how can people do that, and what are some of the services that you can provide?
Yeah. Well, my website is agriprimeconsulting.com, and that's all one word. Um, no dashes or underscores or anything. And there are links to schedule time with me to discuss. There's my phone
Okay.
number on there, and there's my email address. I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook. Um, to be honest, my presence on LinkedIn is probably the stronger of the two.
Okay.
So I'm available on LinkedIn as well. Both there's Agri-Prime Consulting, but there's also my personal page linked to Agri-Prime Consulting is Nicholas Krehbiel.
Okay. And we can link all this in the show notes. We'll put it all in the show notes so people can just click into your website, click into your profile, and then they don't have to remember the
Perfect.
URL.
Yeah. So just any way of getting in touch with me with my
Yeah.
contact information, I'll respond to it. And yeah, I'm I'm open to a lot of different businesses, entities,
Yeah.
whatever help they need. My core value in all of this, my mission, if you will, is that I'm a strong believer that uh, strong businesses help build strong communities.
Hmm.
And in fact, I just put a post on my blog this morning about some of the issues that we're seeing in rural America, and I'm starting to see more articles and more people, engaging Washington or Des Moines or Topeka or whatever centers of power that there are to let them know about what really is a rural crisis.
Yeah.
And our rural towns, particularly in some of the more isolated areas, you're seeing food deserts. You're seeing lack of opportunity. You're seeing lack of quality medical care. And over the years, some of the things that have been done to help prop those up, when you look at, like the New Deal, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee Valley, this is the historian in me coming out, right? The Tennessee Valley Authority and rural electrification, um, you know, other just rural electrification in general, which is another cooperative project as well. All of the
Okay.
rural electric cooperatives throughout Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, you name it. Those are all co-ops as well. But it's been things like that to help prop up our rural communities. Well, we're kind of at a crossroads again, and some of it is access to basic needs as there's more consolidation. Sometimes the places that don't have a lot of population get left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I contend that we have a duty as business leaders and business owners that if you're running a business in a rural community, you need to make that as strong as you possibly can, not just for the profits and your own well-being, but the community at large, because not everybody can make a living coming back and working on the farm.
Right.
Whether it's the local grocery store or a manufacturing shop or a service-based company, whatever it is. And that's kind of where I feel I come in. I want to partner with anyone and everyone. And it can be companies in Des Moines or Chicago, or that no matter the size of your community, the stronger that our opportunities are, the stronger we build those businesses, the stronger the community is going to be, because it's going to provide opportunities for the people in those communities. And but particularly in our rural areas, we really need to pay closer attention to what's going on out there, because there's a reason that, shall we say, things are the way they are.
Yeah. No, I grew up in rural Iowa, and, over the course of my lifetime, there have been two major businesses that have left my hometown community. And when I think back to my dad's generation, my dad also grew up in this same town, even more changes. And so there's a lot of, I do find that very interesting. There was a book written years ago called, I think it was called The Hollowing Out of the Middle, and it was about middle America and how people are, leaving small rural communities. And a big reason is because the employment opportunities are pretty diminished, or, the ones that are there maybe aren't appealing to people. And so like you said, strong businesses build strong communities, and I really like that. And I think that people would be, tremendously excited to connect with you and have you do, a deep dive or even just kind of a quick overview of their organization. So I will for sure leave all of that information in the show notes so people can connect with you, Nick. Final question. It's a fun one. When you meet people, do you try to guess if they're a D, I, S, or C?
To an extent,
Yeah.
yes.
I've always wondered that about coaches. Like, are you trying to figure me out right now?
It's more so from an emotional intelligence standpoint, and just in,
Yes.
in dealing with people, because especially, um, you know, and by the way, I'll also say the differences between operating within an established business and helping run it versus owning a business are
Oh, yeah.
two vastly different dynamics. And so I meet a whole lot of different types of people on a daily basis. And so I
Yeah.
do find myself maybe not thinking in terms of, oh, well, they're an ISO. Um, it's more of they have certain elements of that, and how can I meet them
Sure.
in that? Because with my style, I have a tendency to, I like to talk and chat, and I kind of go off on tangents a little bit. And so if I'm dealing with someone that is a D style coupled with being pressed for time, I have to remind myself, once I see those elements with them, like,
Yeah.
I've got to lock it down. I've got to get
Well,
to
and
the
that's the
point fast.
self-awareness part coming out. You're
Exactly.
aware of your style, and you're trying to figure out the best way to interact and communicate and collaborate with that person and their style. So that's, I think, a beautiful example of
Yeah.
why it's important. So I love it.
I'll say one last thing. I'm sorry. The joke that I always make about those of us that are in the I style is we're really, really good about cramming a 5-minute conversation into 45 minutes.
I do know people like that. I love it. I love it. Well, the funny thing is this podcast lasted about 45 minutes, so.
Perfect. It was a lot more than a 5-minute conversation, though. So
we will leave all your information in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to having people connect with you.
thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to being a part of this.
Thank you for listening to Emotion Well. Employee and Family Resources is a 501c3 nonprofit organization located in Des Moines, Iowa. We support communities, workplaces, and schools with comprehensive behavioral health services. If you would like to contribute to our mission, please click on the donation link in our show notes.